can start now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to one of the amazing capacity building session by CYNG Environmental Law Working Group. My name is Ola Alhajj. I'm the MENA focal point for Chemicals and Waste Youth Platform. And I am the founder of the first ever project in Syria that works on plastic pollution community awareness and finding solution towards it. Pollution today is pervasive and persistent. While the world has achieved significant economic growth over the past few decades, it has been combined by a large amount of pollution with significant impact on human health and ecosystem and the way in which some of the major system processes such as climate are functioning. Plastic are the largest and most harmful and most persistent fraction of the marine litter, accounting for at least 85% of total marine waste. Plastic is in every details of our lives, in our clothes, in our food, in our toys, in the forest, in the ocean, and in our homes. For several years, plastic pollution has been a major issue raised at the UN Environmental Assembly and other global fora. On the 2nd of March 2022, 175 countries participated in the UNIA 5.2 got together and adopted a resolution and plastic pollution toward an international legally binding instrument. Recognizing that the high and rapidly increasing level of plastic pollution represent a serious environmental problem at a global scale, negatively impacting the environmental, social, and economic dimensions of the sustainable development. This historic resolution mandates the Committee of UNEP Executive Director to convey an International Negotiation Committee, INC, to develop and adopt a legally binding instrument on plastic pollution based on a comprehensive approach that addresses the full life cycle of plastic. This landmark decision that launched the process toward a global plastic treaty, which should be developed by the end of 2024. And to know more about and dive more into this treaty, I will pass the floor to my partner, Tabitha. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Ola. So I shall proceed with the INC plastics and its objectives and purposes, because then we have to understand why UNEA 5.2 decided to indulge in this journey to have a legally binding instrument to ensure that plastics are taken care of in the world. So first of all, the INC committee, its purpose was to tackle the challenges posed by plastic pollution, because a lot has taken place. And I think every single person has been affected by plastic pollution in one way or another. And the effects are horrible. And I think we can see them on our day-to-day lives. And so therefore, this kind of menace then therefore needs to be mitigated and taken care of in a global manner, such that all countries come together and decide that this is how we're going to tackle this issue. So the INC, therefore, handles this challenge of plastic pollution through negotiations, cooperation, and the development of effective strategies that should work. So first of all, one of the objectives is the reduction of plastic waste and pollution. So this means that the committee aims to develop a comprehensive measure to reduce the generation of plastic waste, promote sustainable practices that should work, and mitigate the environmental impacts of plastic pollution. Because either way, we cannot really get rid of plastics in its entirety, but we can mitigate or rather reduce the usage or the effects of plastic pollution in such a manner that plastics then are reused, they are recycled, so that they do not cause the kind of pollution that we are experiencing, to an extent where it is part of the triple planetary crisis of pollution. So secondly, The second objective is that the INC works towards the promotion of sustainable alternatives to plastics. So in the same way that you can use wood, you can use paper, you can use other materials apart from plastic. So the INC then comes together and seeks to encourage the development, the adoption and utilization of sustainable alternatives to single-use plastics and other problematic plastic products, such that it reduces the usage of plastics in a state or in the whole world, in fact, because either way, when we use our plastics, they end up in the oceans, they end up in rivers, they end up in forests, and animals are affected, marine life is affected, each and every person is affected due to plastic use. So therefore, if there are other alternatives that can be used as opposed to using plastics, then the INC promotes to encourage that. So thatly is the strengthening of international cooperation and coordination, which is very essential in this process, in such a manner that it recognizes that plastic pollution is a global issue, and the committee focuses on fostering collaboration amongst nations, organizations, and many other stakeholders. So it aims to establish sorry about that. Yes, so it aims to establish common goals and share knowledge and best practices that have worked in other places, and also facilitate the exchange of technical expertise and resources that have also worked. For example, if a country has better solutions or better practices, then they are able to share these practices with other nations in the world, such that the resolutions are the same and they're similar as we work together as a world to mitigate this pollution as a crisis in the world. And then, kindly let's proceed. Yes, we also have to look at the key stakeholders that are involved in this process. So currently, we had the INC Plastics first meeting that took place in early December in Uruguay, and we'll be having the second INC process happening in Paris from 29th of May of this month, actually, to 2nd June. So essentially, this will bring together many stakeholders who will come together to bring in solutions, to bring in resolutions, to bring in many other things that have worked for them, such that we bring in a universal and a uniform legally binding instrument that will work for everybody and will work against plastic production and its effects. So first of all, of course, we have to have governments, because states have to contribute by developing policies, regulations, and legislations in their own states to address plastic pollution and ensure that in all its stages, from its production to its usage to how it's being eradicated, that all these processes are taken care of within a means of legislation or within some regulation that should be there and that should be used and effectively adjusted. So to that extent, we also have the non-governmental organizations. And so NGOs are organizations that also have the best interests, and they have knowledge, and they have made a lot of research, and they're keen on ensuring that plastics are also, yes, yes, that they also have the best practices in play in this matter. So thirdly, industry representatives, who are also very important, because people who've worked in the plastics industry, then they understand the effects, they understand the production, the manufacture, the usage, and the eradication of plastics. Therefore, that kind of knowledge and expertise is very essential in this process. So fourthly, rather, kindly let's proceed. So, sorry, fourthly, we have scientists and researchers. And researchers and scientists are the people who literally come up with the manufacture of plastics, right? And of course, they're the ones who also research on its usage, they research on its effects on the environment, on its effects on human beings, on health, on every single part that affects our daily lives. Of course, we also have international organizations, which is, of course, UNEP, which is taking place in this write-up. We have WHO, the BRS Secretariat is also very important. And these organizations, essentially, they'll provide expertise, support, capacity building efforts, which is also very important, coordinate international cooperation, and facilitate the implementation of global agreements and commitments related to plastic pollution. And then six, we have civil society and consumer groups. These are people who have been directly affected by plastic pollution, and therefore they have knowledge as to how they've been affected, especially to the grassroots perspectives, to bring in how communities are being affected directly by plastics. And then fourthly, lastly, we have the research and academic institutions, which are very essential because therefore, when universities come together, when research institutions come together, they will bring in the expertise and they will bring in evidence-based solutions that should work and can work, and to also contribute to knowledge sharing and train the next generation of leaders and professionals in plastic pollution management. Therefore, these key stakeholders are very important in this process, and this process cannot really take place without these people in the first place. And so as far as the INC plastics that is currently in its drafting mode is concerned, stakeholders are important. And therefore, at this point, I think I will give space to Ayadi to continue on with the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible and it's clear. Okay, moving on to the expectations from the convention. We've already talked about the framework, the kind of stakeholders involved, and we could also talked about, again, the broader instruments that needs to be in place. It's already been, again, highlighted more by Shannon and Tabitha before, so I'll try to keep it a little brief here. But the whole idea is that we have these measures and voluntary approaches that are in place, but we also need this to be integrated across sectors and different value chains. When we talk about circular economy, when we talk about different kinds of stakeholders, be it governments, academia, or young people, we also need to take into consideration the whole life cycle process of plastics themselves. Moving on, this also needs to be further a legally binding instrument. It also has to include, again, biodiversity, different kinds of marine, land, and water pollution, different kinds of waste mechanisms, and again promote sustainable production as well as consumption of these plastics. Because let's face it, we're not gonna again wipe out plastics in a single switch, but it needs to be a process that again needs to be facilitated by these frameworks and by the people who are working in these frameworks. Again, to include resource efficiency along with circular economic chains, will come up with that value chain that we were talking about before. So again, this means that we are trying to solve a very complex mandate, which is the INC. It therefore requires a very strong base that has to be backed by engagement and policies that are rooted in science and technology. This not only needs to happen in this international level, but also be again focused on local grassroots level that reaches national and then international spaces. Next slide, please. The importance, again, and the need of this has already been highlighted before, so I'll just keep it a little more pertinent, is that since this is a legally binding instrument and because the negotiations are supposed to end by 2024, this is again to have that mechanism in place and have these approaches and these dialogues again with all these different kinds of stakeholders, because we already know that plastic is entering every part of our life, as said by Ola before, that it's not only in our environment, but it's also currently inside of us. Moving on. So talking about the kind of impact that we want and the kind of results that we want, it is very important to talk about the kind of end result that we're looking at, and majorly focusing on people like us, young people, young professionals who are in these fields in different ways. Some of us might be activists, others are negotiators, others are again in policy, in again design and technology innovation. We come from different sectors. The fact of the matter is that we lack this unified action when it comes to the result for every individual treaty that comes into place, and therefore it needs to be united. We've seen this time and time before in different kinds of COPs again. Shannon already gave a brief about the BRS COP, and yet we have some nations and some, again, entities or, again, governments, etc., all these different bodies that come together that need to do more. All of us together need to do more, and that's basically the end result that we're looking at, that we have a sustainable livelihood. We, again, have healthier consumption of these kind of products, not just plastic. Next slide, please. This is where we've sort of tried to, again, analyze and put things together in the terms of, if you want a singular chart or something to look at in terms of targets, eliminations, limiting, the way we track, the kind of transparency we want, licensing and the trade for the INC2. And then you have the kind of hard numbers and hard data so that you understand that, for example, there are more than, again, 1 million marine lives that are killed by plastics each year. So this kind of data, again, as we talked about that, all these facts that we talk about, all our negotiations, all our points that need to be placed, not only in international, but also on different levels that we are trying to advocate or, again, work on, has to be placed in science, has to be, again, backed by data that, yes, this is urgent, this is pertinent, people are dying every day, and we need to do something to this, and we need to put an end to this. So, again, moving on to the actual framework and the convention that takes place, we have established targets for reduction of production, which, again, the examples could be globally or nationally as well. You have elimination for these chemicals and polymers that concern in this criteria. Then you have the limitations of these primary polymers and these different kinds of chemicals that are in the end harmful to not only human health, but also to the biodiversity and nature that we're talking about. You have tracking of these different inventories, boundaries, the types and the volume of the chemicals, and again, plastic itself. So again, for all of this mechanism, we need to ensure transparency. It has to have different standards. And again, these standards need to be looked after in terms of data, labeling standards, and again, coordinated nationally as well as globally. Finally, you also have licensing and trades, which again, monitor import, export, the requirements of either parties, and then again, licensing of these schemes itself for consumption and production. The last slide, please. We wanted to, again, end with how we as young people can, again, be part of this process. We, again, found a couple of submissions that we've already done as the chemicals and waste platform for youth under the UNEP and GCY. These are a couple of ways that we can engage. It's not just action in terms of working in your space, but also in terms of, again, accelerating our impact when we come together, because as coalitions, as groups that are working together, we have, again, the space where we can influence these policies directly, influence the policy makers and decision makers directly. And who knows, we also might, again, become the decision makers in the future itself. So again, emphasizing on the fact that we are major stakeholders and we all come together from different places. So taking in context of regions, spaces, and the work that we do together in this constituency is something that's really important. And yeah, I think that's it from my side as well. If anybody would like to add something, please do. But yeah, thank you.